Joining me right now is Mr. Shashi Tharoor, a Congress MP, an author, and of course somebody who's known for his play of words as well. We are here to talk about your book, Mr. Shashi Tharoor, A Wonderland of Words, Around the Word in 101 Essays. In fact, when I spoke to you earlier, I said around the word, but it's around the word in 101 essays. Play of words there, definitely. But before I get to the word, Mr. Tharoor, before I get to the book, you have a very interesting way, unique way of connecting with a huge part of the audience, your voters, even people who are not your voters, you know, the way you use your words. Many of them go to dictionaries to try and understand what you are saying. And then while you are an Indian, you've always defended the right of an Indian to speak the English, which may not be the British English, as it were, the Hinglish even if it is. But how do you look at this unique disposition as a politician?
Yeah, so my argument, Sneha, is that, English was, first of all, an evolving language. It's taken on different guises, different forms, and in different parts of the world, it's evolved its own nature. So if the Americans can say gotten when the British say got, and the Americans can say fall when the British say autumn, why can't Indians say, I don't know, needful or furlong or fortnight, which the British long since stopped saying? Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, they all have versions and variations of the English language, and those are legitimate in their own contexts. And if you go and use Indian English in England, and sometimes you're not fully understood, that's fine, just as when an English comes here and says something, you may not understand them exactly either. But the fact is, it's a proof that it's a living language, that it has its own variations, its own Indian styles in this country.
Well, in your book, Around the Word in 101 Essays, what exactly are you trying to reach out with? What part of your heart are you writing with this time? Of course, is it the play of words of how India talks about non-vegetarian while others don't, or just about how Indians use English in a very peculiar way?
Well, first of all, it's around the word in 101 essays. It's 101
Around
essays
the word.
words.
Yes.
And about words in the sense that everything, how you can use words, the origins of words, the meanings and context, sometimes stories or anecdotes about how some expressions came into being. All of these are part of the joy of discovering language. I write in the introductory essay about my own acquisition, as it were, of words, because what happened was that I was an asthmatic kid in India before television, no Nintendo, no PlayStation, no laptops, no mobile phones, right? So if you're lying in bed, not lying, sitting up in bed, unable to breathe, if you're able to go out and play with your friends because you're too sick all the time, or very often, what do you do? All I had was books. Books were my escape, books were my education, books were my entertainment. And therefore, books became my way of relating to the world. I read widely, indiscriminately. I was the oldest kid in the family, so I didn't have any elder brothers or sisters to borrow books from. I started reading my parents' books before I was old enough to understand them. Now, the result of all of this was I acquired words. Words became my companions, my friends, my source of nourishment, as it were. And when you come across the same word in 3 or 4 different places, 3 or 4 books, 3 or 4 contexts, you'll very quickly figure out exactly how the word is to be used, what it means, what the context and nuance is. And the next result is that without even seeing dictionaries very much, you acquire a pretty decent vocabulary. And that's what happened with me. So words became a fundamental part of who I was. Then again, because I was ill a lot and so on, I started writing as well because I ran out of books to read. And with that, there's always an opportunity to use words, to wield words. And that became a part of who I was. Mm-hmm. My father put me into debating and speechifying from school days onwards. So that too meant using words to persuade, to talk to people, to give an argument and to make sure that the argument was understood and appreciated. All of that, I think, is part of who I am. And then when I became a writer and started writing books, that became also an essential part of my relationship with words.
So is that what a Wonderland of Words is going to be about?
I have a whole range of, of subjects I cover, which range from figures of speech, which range from topics like word origins, how Indian English has its own credibility. Though sometimes people who speak Indian English are guilty of just speaking bad English, and we have to make sure we're aware of which is which. What's an acceptable Indianism? What's an understandable translation from an Indian dialect, like what is a good name, but also
Yeah.
what is simply not good and accurate English. And then there's, as I said, a whole range of essays on the new trends in the language, years of essays on how dictionaries have come up with new words each year to expand the English language, and even picked a word of the year, how that's done, and what kind of words have come up as words of the year. And finally, an essay on future trends in the language, which is of course rather important because the language continues to evolve. Language is and shouldn't be a static thing. So there are words in the from Indian languages that have gone into English. For example, are now legitimate parts of English to the extent that no one realized that they originally were Indian words. Word like loot, which, as I wrote elsewhere, the British took into their dictionaries as well as their habits. They came to India and they stole words from us, like loot, like mulligatawny as a mulligatawny soup. All of these things. The mulligatawny is mulligatawny, or if you look at the word mugger, the crocodile, who is actually now sticking a gun into your ribs in Central Park, came from India. I mean, not the person, but the word to describe it, and so on and so forth. And all of this is part of the origin. But then there's also other things. I've got loan words. Various languages have gone into English. People don't realize there are words in German and French and Japanese that have infused the English language. And I also have something about the various things that can be useful for readers, and for example, the point of punctuation, how that works, apostrophes, hyphens, spelling, some of the explicit and not so well-known rules that guide the usage of English language. Then there's things strictly for amusement and entertainment, misprints in newspapers, puns, humorous stories of various kinds. Some things are slightly more political, like the language of colonization, idioms in the English language that come from places and personalities, telling you the stories of those places and personalities.
Right.
Then literary tools ranging from acronyms to alliterations to anagrams and aptograms to backronyms and contronyms, and all sorts of things that people could. And I try and keep it light and interesting and accessible to people as much as possible.
Right. I think there may be people who may already just try and search meanings for some names, but Mr. Tharoor, allow me to deviate a little bit from this part of the topic at this point. It's while we are talking about the importance of the words and the way they are used, there's also something that's playing out in Kerala that has words at the heart of it, whether it be women saying no, whether it be about men understanding no, whether it be about the point of consent. So much that's playing out in Kerala, with women coming up together in unprecedented ways, women actors for that matter, for a government that set up a report and a committee to look into this, into the allegations in an unprecedented way again. How do you really look at what's happening in Kerala?
You raise a very important question, Sneha, and we have to take this entire matter very seriously. In fact, such terrible things have been rumored from all sections of the film industry around the country, but at least one can say women of Kerala who came forward and demanded that these allegations be taken seriously. There's a group called the Women in Cinema Collective that demanded this inquiry. It took place an all-woman committee headed by a retired woman judge. And the only thing one can say critically of Kerala's government here is that the report was submitted in 2019, and it's absolutely unjustifiable that they sat on it for 5 years when it revealed such damaging, indeed explosive facts about the behavior of people, the power structures in the industry, and the way in which they've actually really, really exploited women. Now, having said all of this, they did redact 69 pages of the report to shield the identities of both the accusers and the accused. But fortunately, a judge has now decided to order the police to file motor FIRs wherever a cognizable offense has been disclosed by a complainant. This was a good thing happening because the culture minister most unfortunately gave an interview saying that since the women concerned had not complained to the government, no action had been taken, which is ridiculous. They complained to a committee, a commission appointed by the government. So obviously they should have had some action to follow. I'm glad it's finally happening. On the resignations you mentioned, some people who resigned have been directly accused, including the secretary of AMMA, the Association of Malayalam Movie Artists. Others have not, as far as we're aware so far, have been named in the report, but they've resigned owning moral responsibility. And there indeed is a moral responsibility, because if you presided over a system that has perpetrated injustice, that has perpetrated awful things, assault and worse, on young, helpless women, because you have the power and they need the job, that's simply not permissible. I think more steps will have to follow, not just punishing the wrongdoers, but also, frankly, ensuring this thing doesn't happen again. First of all, it shouldn't happen in Kerala. The film industry, there are revelations like a commonsensical issue like the lack of toilets for women artists, which can be and should be remedied if necessary by law. If you can spend money to make a movie, you can, produce toilets for your crew and cast. It's unforgivable that you don't do that, or that you give them rest spaces where they can be left inviolate and not disturbed by men. Similarly, it's essential that you have very clear rules as to what cannot be permissible. Obviously, sexual harassment, assault, and worse is not permissible. Women have the right, even, for example, to refuse certain kinds of roles or certain kinds of scenes in certain films in advance, so there's no misunderstanding on what they're expected to do. All of these things should be part of a code of conduct for the film industry.
Right. Mr. Tharoor, thank you so much for joining us. A Wonderland of Words it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be out soon. Thank you so much for joining us.